Chapter 16, Astral Influences-Pneumatology. The Orthodox of the Middle Ages looked upon angels and devils and departed human spirits as being personal entities. They personified the powers of good and evil and made of them caricatures and monsters that flitted from place to place, attempting to subjugate the souls of men to bring them within their power. Now, it's not orthodoxy to just decide what truth is. Orthodoxy is correctly believing. So true orthodoxy doesn't depend on personality. It doesn't depend on popularity. It doesn't depend on acceptance of any sort. The governmental institutions during those times were those of oligarchy, and the poor were dependent upon the favors of the rich. The power of the church was supreme. And the dictates of the clergy suffered no disobedience. Servility and the craving of personal favors were the order of the day, and this state of mind necessarily influenced and modified the religious conceptions of the people. The supreme spirit of the universe became degraded in their eyes to a personal tyrant into whose favor they attempted to wheedle themselves by penitences, supplications, and by means of the intercession of priests who were supposed to be his favorites. Everything that could not be reconciled with existing prejudices and opinions were attributed to the devil, and the horrors of the Inquisitions, religious persecutions, and witch trials are too well known to be required to be recalled to the memory of the reader. The pneuma, our soul. Pneuma, our soul, means a semi-material spirit, an essence, our form, which is neither material and the common acceptation of that term, nor pure spirit. It is like everything else in the universe, a form of will, and may be with or without any intelligence. Usually, it means the connecting link between spirit and body. But there are beings who belong entirely to the realm of the soul and have no such bodies as are commonly called material. It may be said that the soul is a certain state of activity of the will, and the same may be said of the physical body. For if we look at the universe as being a manifestation of will in motion, then all forms and objects that we know of, or which we can imagine, are certain vibrations of will. Thus, we may look upon physical nature as being constituted of a low order of vibrations, upon the soul as a higher octave of the same, and the spirit as being one higher still. Now, the body requires those lower vibrations, the lower hertz, to survive. The higher hertz will kill it if it becomes that. Now, we respond to all sorts of levels. So, when people talk about raising the vibration, they kind of don't know what they're talking about, because if you lower your vibration, you can actually become more aware of the higher vibrations, because you can be at peace and rest and stuff. But of course, if you go too low, then you die too. Because, there really is vibration, but not as people. But I don't think spirit you can see, and you can put in those sorts of terms, because it's on a different plane. If the physical body dies, the lower octave ceases to sound, but the higher one continues and will continue to vibrate as long as it is in contact with the highest. But if the spirit has become separated from it, it will sooner or later cease its activity. Thus, it deformed the substance of the body, of the paradisical man, the man of the new Olymp, the Bakan, and the lower essences of the soul from which the spirit has departed, dissolve into the astral elements to which they belong, as the earthly dissolves the elements of the earth. This dissolution, however, does not take place immediately at the time of the separation of the soul from the body, but may require a long time. That which constituted the mind of a man, the astro, still continues to exist after the death of the body, although the astrum is not the person to which the astrum belonged. If a man has been true during his life, his spirit will be true after his death. If he has been a great astronomer, a magician, an alchemist, his spirit will still be the same, and we may learn a great many things from such spirits, they being the remnants of the mind which once constituted the terrestrial man. Now, we can connect to the memory, legacy, and energy without actually connecting to the being that operated that. But let us also remember this thing about higher vibration, lower vibration. They're probably thinking about how they talk about the lower mind and the higher mind. The lower mind being the control system and the higher mind being the reward system, which you obviously have to work on both respects. And you got to work on the physical body, if you're trying to better your behavior and that sort of stuff. The dissolution, however, does not take place immediately at the time of the separation of the soul from the body, but may require a long time. That which constituted the mind of a man, the astro, still continues to exist after the death of the body, although the astrum is not the person to which the astrum belonged. If a man has been true during his life, his spirit will be true after his death. If he has been a great astronomer, a magician, or an alchemist, his spirit will still be the same, and we may learn a great many things from such spirits, they being the remnants of the mind which once constituted the terrestrial man. There are two deaths, or two separations, the separation of the spirit and soul from the body, and the separation of the spirit from the intellect and animal soul. If a person dies a natural death, i.e. from old age, his passions have died out during his life, his selfish will having become weak, and his mind like that of a child, putting its confidence in its father. His spirit and soul will at the time of his death become free from material bonds and be attracted to a higher zone in spirit life. Now see, that's what the metaphor of God being a father comes from. You have this childlike reliance on God as a father for both information and protection and all that stuff. So that's what it's about, people. When the soul has passed through death, it is then in the essence a spirit. It remains with the works which it has produced there. And in this state it will behold those souls now in spirit life. In the unfathomable world where the soul is, there is no end or object which that soul will have to attain. Where the carrion is, there will the eagles assemble. All that soul desires will come to it. This kind of soul does not enter into communication with mortals because it has no desire for anything earthly. It does not think or speculate about terrestrial things or worry itself about its relatives or friends. It lives in a state of pure feeling, bliss, and enjoyment. The majority of souls depart from their terrestrial forms without spiritual understanding and development, are connected therewith only by a small thread. Such souls, having but little spirituality, will not exist in such glorious bliss as those whose spirituality has been unfolded on earth. Such is the fate of those who die a natural death without development. But the condition of those who die prematurely without being regenerated, either by their own hands or in consequence of some accident, differ greatly, because although their souls have become forcibly separated from their bodies, the spirit does not therefore necessarily leave the soul, but may remain with it until another separation takes place. They remain in such cases human beings like the others. only with this difference, that they do not possess a physical body, and that they remain in such a state until the time arrives when, according to the law of nature and their own predestination, karma, their physical death should have taken place. At that time, the separation of their higher and lower principles takes place. Now, karma is this cause and effect, what's happening. Up to that time, they possess their astral bodies. Such bodies are invisible to those not developed, but they are visible to them and have sensation and perceptive facilities. And they perform it in their thoughts, that which they have been in the habit of performing during life, and believe that they are performing it physically. Sensation is an attribute of life. If life resides in the astral body will have sensation, and as long as that body is connected sympathetically with the dead physical body, it may even feel any injury inflicted upon the latter. The physical body, if it is inanimate, has no sensation. The latter belongs to the inner man. Wherever the center of consciousness is established, there is sensation. They still remain in the earth sphere and are called Kabi'ili, Nameres, and so on. They are still in full possession of their earthly desires and passions. They attempt to satisfy them and are instinctively attracted to persons in whom they find corresponding desires and passions, and to such places where they hope to satisfy them by entering into sympathy with such persons, mediums. And they are therefore often inclined to instigate such mediumistic persons to the commission of crimes and immoralities. Neither can they avoid doing so. Oh, certainly they have their own choices, these fire beings do. Because by losing their physical bodies, they have also lost the necessary amount of energy and willpower to exercise self-control and employ their reasoning faculties. No, it's not the dead that's doing this to the mediums, but they often haunt the places where they used to spend their time during life, thus attempting to find relief from their burning thirst after the gratification of their desires. Books might be filled with reliable accounts of haunted houses and instances in which such ghosts have been seen are exceedingly numerous. Some people that may not be able to see them may feel them instinctively, or even physically, like a cold wind or a current of electricity passing through the body. Wherever their thoughts track them, they will go. If they have committed some crime, they may be bound by repentance to the place where it was perpetrated. Well, it's long known that an Ifrit, or whatever you want to call that sort of strong spiritual entity, certain degrees of crime will open up a place for it. And you don't have to do the crime yourself. You can actually use the energy of a place as a opening spot, or maybe it's there and you can, if you're going to go down that route. If they have a treasure buried, care for the money may hold them there. Hatred or desire for revenge may tie them to their enemies. Love may turn them into vampires and connect them with the objects of their passion, provided that there are some elements in the latter which will attract them, because of the astral body of an evil spirit cannot influence the mind of a pure person, neither during life nor after death, unless they are mutually connected by some similarity in their mental organization. Chinamen and Hindus may have been known to kill themselves for the purpose of revenge, so that their souls may cling to their enemies and trouble their minds, or drive them to suicide. It is also well proven that wars are often followed by numerous suicides occurring in the victorious army. Such a case of vampirism is personally known to me, the author. A young man killed himself on account of his passion for a married lady. The latter loved him, but did not encourage his advances on account of her matrimonial obligations. After his death, his astral form became attracted to her, and as she was of a mediumistic temperament, he found the necessary conditions to become partially materialized. It required a long, continued effort until she finally became rid of the incubus. If our practitioners of medicine were better acquainted with occult facts, many mysterious cases that come under their observation might become clear to them, and they would soon obtain a deeper insight into some cases of mania, hysteria, hallucination, etc. Under certain circumstances, such human entities become visible or manifest their presence in some manner. They may appear in bodily shape or remain invisible and produce sounds and noises such as knocks, laughing, whistling, sneezing, howling, groaning, sighing, walking, trampling, throwing stones, and moving articles of furniture or other objects, or it may seem to be, right? And all this may be done by them for the purpose of calling the attention of the living so that they may obtain an opportunity to enter into communication with them. All such spirits are a product of imagination and will. If a person has an evil imagination, he creates a corresponding form in his mind, and if he infuses that form with his will, he has then created a spirit. Well, thought form entities and spirits are not quite the same thing, but not the appearance of supermundane or submundane visitors are caused by apparitions of the ghosts or astral bodies of suicides or victims of accidents, nor by the astral corpses and the evestra of the dead. But there are other invisible entities that may haunt the houses of mortals and become occasionally visible and tangible to the physical senses if the conditions necessary for such a purpose exists. One of these classes, if the conditions necessary for such a purpose exists. One of these classes is made up of the being called phantasmata. These ghost-like spirits are nocturnal spirits, having reasoning capabilities similar to those of men. They seek to attach themselves to men, especially to such as have little power of self-control and over whom they may gain power. Isn't there something in Isaiah that uses this sort of phrase? There are a great many kinds of such spirits, good as well as evil ones, and they love to be near man. In this, they are comparable to dogs, who are also fond of the company of men. But man can profit nothing from their company. They are empty shadows, and are only an encumbrance to him. They are afraid of red corals, as dogs are afraid of a whip, but the brown corals attract them. The author recommends the wearing of red corals as a remedy against melancholy and witchcraft. Now, if you don't believe that stuff, it doesn't convince you, that stuff. So, because there's a difference between the charm or amulet function and that of a talisman. As a remedy against melancholy and witchcraft. Now, if it makes you happy, I got this nice little red thing with me. Could that be of Chinese origin, where they said that? But, they are ruled by the influence of the sun, while those of brown color are under the influence of the moon. The red ones are disagreeable, not only to phantasmata, but also to monsters, incubi, succubi, and other evil spirits. But the brown corals are agreeable to and attract them. Or perhaps they all do. And if the ones are, a lot of corals dyed red or whatever. I know some cases of obsession, melancholy, depression of mind, hypochondria, etc., that have been successfully treated by the wearing of red corals, while other articles employed for the same purpose had no effect, and the cure could therefore not be attributed merely to the belief of the patient. The ignorant will find it easier to ridicule such things than to explain them. Some people believe that such spirits can be driven away with holy water and by the burning of incense, but the genuine holy water cannot be had so long as no man is found holy enough to be able to sooner attract evil spirits than drive them away, because all evil spirits are attracted by things that are attractive to the senses, and if we wish to drive them away, it would be more reasonable to employ disagreeable odors for such a purpose. The true and effective power against all evil spirits is the burning of temple incense and the exercise of a strong will. If we love all the source of all good with all our heart, mind, and desire, we may be sure never to fall into the power of evil. But priestly ceremony, the sprinkling of water, and the singing of incantations are the inventions of clerical vanity, and they therefore take their origin from the source of all evil. Ceremonies were instituted originally to give an external form to an internal act, but where the internal power to perform such acts does not exist, a ceremony will be of no avail except to attract such spirits as may love to mock at our foolishness. Another case consists of the incubi and succubi, of which the rabbinical traditions speak in an allegorical manner as having been created by the spilling of the seed of Adam, the animal man, while engaged with Lilith, his first wife, meaning a morbid imagination. What's wrong with getting together with your first wife? Oh, the first wife liked to be on top. Okay, that's the... Imagination is the cause of incubi and succubi, the fluidic larvae. The incubi are male and the succubi are female beings. They are the outgrowths of a lewd and intense imagination of men or women, and after they take form, they are carried away. They are formed of the sperma found in the imagination of those who commit the unnatural sin of onan in thought and desire. Coming as it does from the imagination alone, it is no true sperma but only a corrupted salt essence, only a seed that enters the organs which nature provided for its development can grow into a body. It is here not the question of merely visible and tangible things, but of the products of the mind, which are also substantial and which may become visible and tangible under certain conditions. The visible body, as well as the terrestrial body, act each in its own way. That which the visible body performs is done with the hands. The inner man works by means of his imagination and will. The works of the former appear to us real, those of the latter like shadows. If a seed is not planted in the proper soil, it will rot. If sperma does not come into the proper matrix, it will not produce anything good, but something useless. If therefore the incubi and succubi, grown out of corrupted seed, without the natural order of things, are evil and useless, Thomas of Aquin has made an error by mistaking such a useless thing for a perfect thing. The sperma, coming from imagination, is born in amor heteros. This means a kind of love, in which a man may imagine a woman, or a woman a man, to perform a connubial act with the image created in the sphere of his mind. From this act results an expulsion of useless, ethereal fluid, impotent to generate a child, but capable of bringing larvae into existence. So, they're telling you not to fantasize, people, no mental masturbation. Such an imagination is the mother of a luxurious unchastity, which, if continued, may render man impotent and woman sterile, because much of the true creative and formative power is lost by the frequent exercise of such morbid imagination. This is frequently cause of moles, aberrations, miscarriages, and malformations. Such corrupted sperma may be taken away by spirits that wander about at night, and who may carry it into a place where they may hatch it out. There are spirits that may perform an actus with it, as may also be done by witches, and a consequence of that actus, many curious monsters of a horrible shape, and like this rock that I was laying on, may come into existence. If such monsters are born from a powerful, conscious imagination, the same consciousness will also be created in them. The spirits of night may use all that is born from such sperma according to their pleasure, but they can use nothing of a human character, are possessing a true spirit. Amas hergos is a state of the invisible body, and is caused by an overheated imagination stimulated to such an extent as to eject sperma, out of which the incubi and succubi may grow. Well, nocturnal emissions happen whether or not somebody's going to fantasize. The body produces regardless. So, now, there could be an increase in occurrence, though. In ordinary polycynibus nocturnalis, the body loses sperma without any effort of the imagination, and the spirits of night can therefore not use it for their purposes. If women who have passed beyond the age of fertility and are unchaste and of a vivid imagination, they may also call such things into existence. If a person of either sex have lewd desires and an active imagination, or if they are passionately in love with another person of the opposite sex and unable to obtain the object of their desire and fancy, then an incubus or succubus may take the place of the absent object, and in this way sorcerers may call succubi and witches incubi into existence. Medieval occult literature and that of modern spiritualism contain many examples of incubi and succubi, some having appeared visibly and tangibly, others, though unseen, were touched and felt. Such cases are, at the present day, much more numerous than is commonly believed, but they can only materialize if the necessary conditions are given. They are therefore only felt during a state of sickness, and after the recovery of the patient, they disappear, because they cannot draw the elements necessary for materializations out of a healthy constitution. Such succubi and incubi are therefore the products of a physical and morbid, diseased state. The morbid imagination creates an image. The will of the person objectifies it, and the nerve aura can render it substantial to sight and touch. Moreover, having once been created, they attract to themselves corresponding influences from the soul of the world. To prevent such unfortunate occurrences, it is necessary to be chaste, honest, and pure in thought and desire. Whoever is unable to remain so should not remain single. Well, if you're unchaste and you're married, that's even worse, right? Or perhaps overall, maybe there'll be less of it if somebody's just cheating on their spouse. But chastity and virginity are not the same thing. Let's remember that. Animal instincts cannot be suppressed, and the flesh cannot be mortified, except by awakening a higher psychical activity in the place of the lower ones, or by an exaltation of the spiritual nature over the animal principle in man. Abstinence in acts is useless for spiritual development unless it is followed by abstinence in thought. Enforced celibacy does not make a priest. A true priest is a saint, and saints are persons who have outgrown their carnal desires. Is that the case? Or is it that the carnal desires are a means? And not just a means of indifference, from a moral aspect. Imagination is a great power, and that the world knew what strange things might be produced by the power of imagination to the public authorities would cause all the idle persons to go to work and to employ their time in some useful manner, and they would take care of those who are unable to control their own imagination in order that such evil results should be avoided. The so-called dragon is an invisible being, which may become visible and appear in human form and cohabit with witches. This is accomplished by means of the sperma, which is lost by onanists, fornicators, and prostitutes in acta venero, in which such persons use as a corpus to create for themselves a human form, because the whole of human form is typified in the sperma. Now, the so-called sin of Onan was that he pulled out. It's not every time intentional action has released, but see, the true onanism is that the guy was married, and he was trying to avoid the reaction of his marital duty. Because, of course, his duty to his dead brother was to marry his wife and get her pregnant. I'm not sure that that's a duty to marry your dead sibling's spouse, but here themselves a human form, because the whole of the human form is divided in the sperma, and if such spirits use the sperm of a certain person, it as if one man puts on the coat of another, and then they have the form of that person and resemble him in all his parts and details. They cannot, however, become visible unless they can draw some of the astral essence from the person or persons in whose presence they desire to appear. In other words, persons must be mediumists to produce such manifestations of form. Well, that's not entirely the point. It's saying that those mediumists, are giving up of something of themselves. They're not totally devoted to God. They're devoted towards having these experiences to the point where they give up something of themselves to these spirits so that these spirits can give them the show. The Faustian pact, you could say. Another hideous monster is the basilisk, created by sodomy, and also the Aspis and Leo. Aspis and Leo. Oh, there are innumerable bastard forms, half men, half spiders, or toads, etc., inhabiting the astral plane. The Bin people, is that what that group is called? The Bin people? If such forms are sufficiently dense to become visible, they appear like a colored shadow or mist. They have no life of their own, but they borrow it from the person who called them into existence, just as the shadow is cast by a body, and where there is no body, there can be no shadow. They are often generated by idiots, immoral, depraved, or diseased persons who lead irregular and solitary lives and who are addicted to bad habits. The coherence of particles composing the bodies of such beings is not very strong, and they are afraid of draughts of air, light, fire, sticks, and weapons. They are a sort of airy appendix to the body of their parents, and there is sometimes such an intimate connection between them and the body of their progenitors that if an injury is inflicted upon the former, it may be transmitted to the latter. They are parasites drawing vitality out of the persons to whom they are attracted, and they may exhaust the vitality of the latter very soon if such persons are not very strong. The writer will here give a very good description of some of the modern spirit materialization. The airy appendix, astral form, usually comes out of the left side of the medium in the region of the spleen. Mediums need not necessarily be depraved persons, but there must be some fault in their organization, or else combination of their principles would be too strong to part with some of their astral substance. Materializing mediums may be very good people, but solitary lives and vicious habits may lead to the development of such mediumship, which may prove very injurious in the end. Some such beings influence men according to their qualities. They watch them, increase and deepen their faults, find excuses for their mistakes, causing them to wish for the success of evil actions, and gradually absorb their vitality. They fortify and support the imagination in the operations of sorcery. They sometimes utter false prophecies and give out misleading oracles. If a man has a strong and evil imagination and wishes to injure another, such evil spirits are always ready to lend a helping hand for the accomplishment of his purpose. Such things may render their victims insane. Obsession. If the latter are too weak to resist their influence, a healthy and pure person cannot be obsessed by them. Beliefs and actions are to be kept pure, because such larvae can only act upon men if the latter make room for them in their minds. And that means lack of beliefs and stuff too, not just the wrong ones. A healthy mind is a castle that cannot be invaded without the will of the master. But if they are allowed to enter, they excite the passions of men and women. They create cravings in them. They produce bad thoughts, which act injuriously upon the brain. They sharpen the animal intellect and suffocate the moral sense. Evil spirits obsess only those human beings in whom the animal nature is preponderating. Minds that are illumined by the spirit of truth cannot be possessed. Only those who are habitually guided by their own lower impulses may become subject to their influence. Exorcism and ceremonies are useless in such cases. A strong will and abstinence from all evil thoughts that may stimulate the imagination or excite the brain are the only true remedies. Some believe in having a priest pray over them, but this is useless. Exorcism doesn't work, regardless of the authority of the other person involved, if the person being exorcised is making no change in their opinions and actions and consciousness, or however you're going to phrase all that stuff. By praying is meant exercise of the spiritual will. Oh, you stupid and foolish priest who knows nothing, because you imagine yourself to be able to drive away evil spirits with sweet-smelling incense, such as is enjoyed by good and evil spirits alike. If instead of your incense you were to take a sapphotita, then might you succeed in driving away the evil spirits, and the good ones beside. And the case of obsession is a purely psychical and moral act. The obsessed person should use true faith in itself and abstinence, and after that a strong-willed person should will such spirits to depart. It often happens that bodily diseases are the cause of morbid desires. A disease of the skin, spiritus vagina or Sarah may cause erotic desires, and a displacement of the womb. Sereti? Okay, there's some not printing of these words. An erosion, ulcer, or inflammation of the os uteri causes mental depression and hysteria. Piles may cause melancholy, etc., etc. But all such causes are, in their turn, the effects of previous causes that may have a psychical origin, and they establish the conditions by which elementary influences may act. The reason why those who have never developed the inner sight, spiritual, cannot see such astral entities is because they are transparent as air. You cannot see the air unless you produce a smoke in it, and even in that case, you do not see the air itself. The smoke that is carried by the air. But we may feel the air when it moves. We may also occasionally feel the presence of such entities, if they are dense enough to be felt. However, the purpose of our physical senses is to perceive the objects that exist on the plane for which the senses are adapted, and therefore the physical senses exist for the purpose of seeing physical things, and the senses of the inner man are made to see things of the spiritual plane. When the outer senses are inactive, the inner senses, spiritual sight, may awaken to life, and we may see the objects on the astral plane as we see things in dreams. There are also some poisons by which the organic activity of the body may be suppressed for a time, and the consciousness of the inner man be rendered more active, which may therefore enable us to see the things on the astral plane. But such poisons are destructive of reason and very injurious to the health. In fevers, deliriums, etc., such things may also be seen. Some of them may be creations of the mind of the patient. Others may have been created by the morbid imagination of another person, as described above. Experiments that have been made in London with the inhalations of various ethers, chloroform, nitrous oxide gas, and hydrocarbonates have had the effect of producing such hallucinations. Before these gases were known, fumigations of poisonous substances were used for such persons. The receipt for the materials used for such fumigations were to be kept very secret on account of the abuse that might have been made of such a knowledge, and in consequence of which a person may even be made insane. One of the most effective fumigations used by the writer for the purpose of causing apparitions is made of henbane mixed with temple incense. The fumigations to drive away evil spirits are made of sulfur mixed with temple incense. For the first, use 1/3 henbane and 2/3 temple incense. For the second use, 1/3 sulfur and 2/3 temple incense. Now there was this one store in the mall, Gifts from Afar. I don't know if it was a chain or whether this is just, this store in this one mall or something. And they had this stuff called temple incense. It's pretty good stuff. And it was actually, I guess it was brand name with the other whatever. But is it the same sort of blend, or I don't? You kind of wonder which temple, right? But if such entities are invisible under normal conditions to a human being, they may well be enough perceived by a human elementary consciously existing on their plane, and what is still more depraved, human characters may take themselves the forms of animals and monsters to which they were brought to resemble by their evil thoughts. Form is nothing but an appearance representing a character, and the character takes the form. If the character of a person is thoroughly evil, it will cause the astral form to assume a hideous form. Therefore, the souls of the depraved may appear in animal shapes. This is confirmed by Swedenborg in his description of hell, and also by Jacob Boehm. The animal soul of the departed takes the form and shape of the animal whose character predominated in his constitution. Pure spirit has no form. It is formless like the sunshine, but as the sunshine causes the elements of matter to grow into plants, likewise the soul substances may be formed into beings having shapes through the action of the spiritual rays. These are good spirits and spirits of evil, planetary spirits and purified spirits. There are the spirits of the four elements, and there are many thousand different kinds. There is a never-ending chain of births and transformations taking place in the world of causes, spirits, as in the world of effects, forms. The lives of some such entities extend over enormous periods of time. Others have only a short individual existence. According to the Brahminical teachings, there are 7 main classes of spirits, some of them having innumerable subdivisions. First, Arupa, formless spirits, planetary spirits, the intelligent 6th principle of the planet, whose product they are. Second, Grupa Devas, having forms, high planetary spirits, Kyan, Kalans. And notice how they're pointing out that Deva or Devi is not the same thing as saying a god. It's kind of like saying angel. Third, Sakas and Mohinins, male and female elementaries, consisting of the astral forms of the dead. They may be obsessed by elementals and cause incubi and succubi. Fourth, Margarupas, forms of desires and passion, souls doomed to destruction. Fifth, Asuras, elementals, gnomes, sylphs, undines, salamanders, etc. They will develop into human beings in the next Manvantara cycle of evolution. Sixth, beasts, elementals having animal forms, monstrosities. Seventh, Raksasas or demons, souls of sorcerers and of men with great intelligence, but with evil tendencies, criminals for the advancement of science, dogmatists, sophists, vivisectionists, etc. furnish material for the development of such devils. Or perhaps the devils are there, they were created as a different type and they chose to be devils, and a certain human consciousness and outer deeds can feed them in a way. And appearing in certain shapes is confirmed by Swedenborg in his description of hell, and also by Jacob Boehm. The animal soul that departed takes the form and shape of that animal whose character predominated in his constitution. Now, you can say that some of these various types of spirits appear in ways that will communicate something to the person who called them forth, or the person that they appeared to nevertheless. And does that say something about their character, good or bad? It might depend, right? The Asuras are often called Devas and are worshipped in many places in India. They are the guardian spirits at certain places, gardens, houses, etc., and have temples of their own. There are many thousand varieties. Each child receives, at the time of his birth, a familiar spirit or genius, and such spirits sometime instruct their pupils, even while the latter are in their earliest youths. Well, I think that's actually more likely. That's where maybe some of the so-called imaginary friends are, is there's really a being there. They often teach these youths to do very extraordinary things. There is an incalculable number of these geniuses in the universe, and we may learn through them all the mysteries of the chaos in consequence of their connection with the mysterious Magdam. Such familiar spirits are called Flaga. They are evidently a different class of familiar spirits than the invisible guides mentioned above. The spirit which each child receives at its birth, and which attends to the person during the terrestrial life, is his own spiritual self, the Grana Sharira. There are several kinds of flaga, and there are two ways by which we may obtain knowledge through them. One way is thereby becoming visible and able to talk with us. The other way is by their invisible influence upon your mind. The art of necromancy enables man to perceive interior things, and there is no mystery concerning any human being that may not be found out by that art, and the flaga may be made to reveal it either by persuasion or by the strength of one's will, for the flagai obey the will of man for the same reason as a soldier obeys the will of the commander, or an inferior obeys that of his superior, although the latter may be physically stronger than the former. Necromancy is not to be confounded with necromancy is not to be confounded with necromancy. Did I say necromancy instead of necromancy? Necromancy is the interior perception. Okay. The flaga can be made to appear visibly in a magic mirror or crystal, and so on. And not only the flaga themselves, but the person to whom they belong may be seen and all their secrets known. And if it is not practicable to cause them to become visible, such secrets may be found out by communication of thought or by signs, allegorical vision, etc. By the assistance of these flaga, hidden treasures may be found, and closed letters may be read, and everything may be seen, no matter how much it may be hidden from sight. For the opening of the interior sight removes the veil of matter. Things that have been buried may thus be found, stolen goods may be recovered, etc. The flaga may reveal their secrets to us in dreams, the good as well as the evil. He who obtains knowledge obtains it from the spirits. He who knows the elementals knows himself. He who understands the nature of the elements understands how the microcosm is constructed. Flaga are the spirits that instructed mankind in arts and sciences in ancient times, and without them there would be no science or philosophy in the world. The whole of the universe is an expression of the consciousnesses, and there are, therefore, innumerable states of consciousness and intelligent will in the world, some invisible and some invisible forms, some shapeless, like currents of air, others undefined, like mists or clouds, others solid as rocks, some permanent, like the stars. In the practice of divination, my sortilegayam, etc., the flagai guide the hand. Now, is that like Ouija boards and stuff? Is that what they mean? I didn't see people letting themselves be possessed and trusting whatever they're saying. It's like, oh yeah, oh well, we're responsible for all this knowledge. You people didn't figure it out. No, people didn't figure it out. It wasn't revealed by God or something. It was just us lower spirits doing what we're capable of, and I would think twice about grandiose claims of any entity, right? Particularly, such arts are neither from God nor from the devil, as many believe, but they are from the flaga. The ceremonies that are customarily used on such occasions are mere superstition, and have been invented to give to such occasions an air of solemnity. Those who do practice that art are often themselves ignorant of the laws that control it, and they may attribute the results obtained to the ceremonies and mistake their tomfooleries for the essential thing. The rationale on which divination, geomancy, the practice of the divining rod, etc. is based is that by means of such practices in regard to certain things, such as already exist in the spirit of man, they come to the understanding of the intellect of the personality. So see, that's the basis of divination that you should go on, not the other, that, oh, if I get possessed, the spirits are going to put messages through me or something. That's, if it's done through worship of whatever, then it can become an issue, right? The inner man cannot, under all circumstances, communicate his knowledge to the external man, because the consciousness of the two is not identical, but the spirit may influence the nerve or aura of the person and control the muscles of his body, and thus guide his hands. But if you open yourself to the will, the message of undefined entities or type of entity, at the very least there's a mentality that can associate. Because a lot of the channeling is there's a mentality that you put on it, and that sort of mentality is what's answering. So your projections of that mentality. But then again, there's possible spiritual attractions and repulsions involved in that. In regard to the reliance that can be put into the revelations of invisible beings, entities, elementaries, etc., the writer would say that evil spirits love to lead men into error, and therefore their prophecies are usually unreliable and their predictions based upon trickery. Many spirits are mute, so that they may not tell everything so plainly to man. That the latter does not need to use his reason to avoid making mistakes. The spirits do not always instruct man, and they do not always obey his command. Therefore, they are often silent when their talk is most needed, and they frequently speak false when it is of the utmost importance to know the truth. This is the reason that so many things have been told by spirits that have proved lies and illusions, and some spirits lie a great deal more than others. It may happen that perhaps out of a dozen predictions made by such spirits, one accidentally comes true, or more likely is something so vague that it's attributed as true, and it's like, well, it could have came out different ways. And ignorant people will, in such cases, pay no attention to the fact that the 11 predictions were false, but they will be ready to believe everything that such spirits may say. Such spirits often teach those persons who deal with them to perform certain ceremonies, to speak certain words and names in which there is no meaning. Well, often the meaning is not known until later, but or there is meaning, but perhaps it's disconnected in some way. And they do all such things for their own amusement and to have some sport at the expense of credulous persons. They are seldom what they pretend to be. They accept names, and one will use the name of another, or they may assume the mask and the ways of acting of another. If the occult student has such a spirit belonging to a better class, he may make a good medium, but one who is a lying spirit will hear nothing but lies, and on the whole, many evil spirits surpass each other in deception and lies. Those who have some experience in modern spiritualism will recognize the truth of this statement. Spiritualists should not act upon the advices of spirits. If such advices are against their own reason, and scientists should not rely on the opinion of others if such opinions are against their own common sense. Now, that's the thing too. You can trust and verify, but you have to actually do something towards verifying. And why do all this stuff to summon up spirits that you don't trust with what they're saying or doing? I mean, what's the sense in that? That you're going to convince them, oh, well, help me be a good Hindu or help me be a good Christian or something? Is that the idea? Man is an instrument through which all the three worlds, the spiritual, the astral, and the elementary world, are acting. In him are beings from all these worlds, reasonable and unreasonable, intelligent and unintelligent creatures. A man without any self-knowledge and self-control is made to act according to the will of these creatures. The true philosopher acts according to his own will. If the masters to which man obeys are foolish, their servants will also act foolishly. It is true that everyone thinks that he is the master and that he does what he pleases, but he does not see the fool within him, who is his master, and in whom he becomes a fool himself. There is another class of spirits, the Sephana, of the elemental spirits of nature. The elementals are not spirits because they have flesh, blood, and bones. They live and propagate offspring. They eat and talk, act and sleep, etc., and consequently they cannot be properly called spirits. They are beings occupying a place between men and spirits, resembling men and women in their organization and form, and resembling spirits in the rapidity of their locomotion. They are intermediary beings, are composita, formed out of two parts joined to one, just as two colors mixed together appear as one color, resembling neither one nor the other of the two original ones. The elementals have no higher principles. They are neither immortal, and when they die, they perish like animals. Now, the jinn sometimes will make it seem like they die to people, but they have respite. Certain ways of them may change from era to era, though. Neither water nor fire can injure them, and they cannot be locked up in our material prisons. They are, however, subject to diseases. Their costumes, actions, forms, ways of speaking, etc., are not very unlike those of human beings, but there are a great many varieties. They have only animal intellects and are incapable of spiritual development. These spirits of nature are not animals. They have a reason and language like man. They have minds, but no spiritual soul. This may appear strange and incredible, but the possibilities of nature are not limited by man's knowledge of them, and the wisdom of the Creator is unfathomable. They have children, and these children are like themselves. They are liable to sickness, and they die like animals. Their habits resemble those of men. They work and sleep. They eat and drink and make their clothing, and are nearest to man. They live in the four elements, the nympha in the element of water, the sylphs in that of the air, the pygmies in the earth, the salamanders in the fire. They are also called Indina, Sylvestris, Nomi, Volcani, etc. Each species moves only in the element to which it belongs, and neither of them can go out of its appropriate element, which is to them as the air is to us, or the water to the fishes, and none of them can live in the element belonging to another class. To each elemental being, the element in which it lives is transparent and respirable, as the atmosphere is to ourselves. The four classes of nature spirits do not mix with each other. The gnomes have no intercourse with the undines or salamanders, nor the sylvestres with either of these. As a fish lives in the water, it begins it being its element, so each being lives in its own element. For instance, the element wherein man breathes and lives is the air, but to the undines, the water, is what air is to us. And if we are surprised that they are in the water, we may also be surprised because we are in the air. Thus the elements of the gnomes is the earth, and they pass through rocks and walls and stones like a spirit, for such things are to them no greater obstacles than air is to us. In the same sense, the fire is the air in which the salamanders live, but the sylvestres are the nearest related to us, for they live in the air like ourselves. They would be drowned if they were under water, and they would suffocate in the earth, and be burned in the fire. For each being that belongs to its own chaos and dies if transported into another one. If that chaos is gross, the beings living in it are subtle. But if the chaos is subtle, the beings are gross. Therefore, we have gross bodies so that we can pass through the air without being blown down. And gnomes have subtle forms so as to be able to pass through the rocks. Men have their leaders and authorities. Bees and ants have their queens. Sheep and other animals have their leader also. And we also have the spirits of nature, their kings and queens. The animals receive their clothing from nature, but the spirits of nature prepare it themselves. The omnipotence of the Creator is not limited to his taking care only of man, but is abundantly able to take care also of spirits of nature and many other things of which men know nothing. They see the sun and the sky the same as we, because each element is transparent to those who live therein. Thus the sun shines through the rocks for the gnomes, and the water does not hinder the undines from seeing the sun and the stars. They have their summers and winters, and their earth bears them fruit, for each being lives on that element whereof it has grown. Semi-annual man may be looked upon as an element of the air, originating from a union of the Hyan Kohans, sons of wisdom, with daughters of giants. See the Bible, Genesis chapter 4, verse 4. Decided to do a rough reading of Genesis, you could say, throw in some comment. And as far as personalities of the elementals are concerned, it may be said that those belonging to the elements of water resemble human beings of either sex. Those of the air are greater and stronger. The salamanders are long, clean, and dry. The pygmies are the length of about 2 spans, but they may extend or elongate their forms until they appear like giants. The elementals of air and water, the sylphs and nymphs, are kindly disposed towards men. The salamanders cannot associate with him on account of the fiery nature of the element wherein they live, and the pygmies are usually of a malicious nature. The latter are building houses, vaults, and strange-looking edifices of some certain semi-material substances unknown to us. They have some kind of alabaster, marble, cement, etc. But these substances are as different from ours as the web of a spider is different from our linen. Nymphs have their residences and palaces in the element of water. Sylphs and salamanders have no fixed dwellings. On the whole, the elementals have an aversion against self-conceited and opinionated persons, such as dogmaticists, scientists, drunkards, and gluttons, and against vulgar and quarrelsome people of all kinds. But they love natural men, who are simple-hearted and childlike and innocent and sincere. And the less there is of vanity and hypocrisy in a man, the easier it will be for him to approach them. But otherwise they are as shy as wild animals. Man lives in the exterior elements, and the elementals live in the interior elements. They have dwellings, and clothing, and manners, and costumes, and languages, and governments of their own, in the same sense as the bees have their queens and herds of animals their leaders. They are sometimes seen in various shapes. Salamanders have been seen in the shape of fiery balls or tongues of fire running over the fields or appearing in houses. Nymphs have been made known to adopt the human shape, clothing, and manner, and to enter into a union with man. There are certain localities where large numbers of elementals live together, and it has occurred that a man has been admitted into their communities and lived with them for a while, and that they have become visible and tangible to him. It is not credible that a person has entered with his physical body into the Venus mountain, or Untersberg, or any such renowned places of which popular tradition speaks. Neither have the witches and sorcerers of the Middle Ages been at the witch Sabbath in their physical bodies, and it seems equally improbable that a person should ever have entered physically the abodes of disembodied adepts But the physical body of man is not the man. It is only his external shadow. And wherever man's consciousness is, there will he be present himself. But while he is there, he does not miss his exterior body, of which he has no more use than a part of his clothing purposely laid away. And on reawakening to physical consciousness, he may well believe that he has been to such a plane in his physical form. The spirits are invisible to many, but nevertheless a spirit may appear to our physical sight, and likewise man is invisible to the spirits of nature, and what the undines know of us is to them merely what fairy tales are to us. Well, myth doesn't make it untrue. The undines appear to man, but not man to them. Man is gross in the body and subtle in the chaos. Therefore they may enter his chaos, astral form, and appear to him and remain with him, marry and bear children with him. Thus an undine may marry a man and keep house with him, and her children will be human beings and not undines, because they receive a human soul from the man, and moreover, the undine herself thereby receives the germ of immortality. Man is bound to nature by means of his spiritual soul, and if an undine becomes united to man, she will thereby become bound to nature. As an undine, without her union with man, dies like an animal. Likewise, man is like an animal if he severs his union with nature. Therefore, the nymphs are anxious to become united with man. They seek to become immortal through him. They have a mind and an intellect like man, but not the immortal soul, such as we have obtained through the development. But the spirits of the earth, the air, and fire seldom marry a human being. They may, however, become attached to him and enter his service. It must not be supposed that they are airy nothings, or merely ghosts, or appearances. They are flesh and blood, only subtler than man, i.e., by the substance of the mind. The nymphs sometimes come out of the water, and may be seen sitting on the shore near their dwelling, and they, as well as the gnomes, have a language like man. But the spirits of the woods are more rough and speak nothing, although they are able to speak and are clever. The nymphs appear in human form and clothing, but the spirits of fire are of a fiery shape. They are usually not to be found in the company of men, but they come to cohabitate with old women, such as are witches, and they are sometimes obsessed by the evil spirits. All this is in the divine order of things, and will become manifest in due time, so that we will then be able to see that which now seems almost incredible. Now, the clothing of nymphs, undines, or whatever you want to call it, that idea has been linked to why some cultures have something like a bikini. Now, part of what they did in modern times was they wanted to sell less clothing for the same amount of money. So that was part of what happened too. And honestly, people do know how to entice of their own. But all this is in the divine order of things, and will become manifest in due time, so that we will then be able to see that which now seems almost incredible. In the legends of the saints, the elemental spirits of nature are often alluded to as devils, a name which they do not deserve, because there are good as well as bad elementals. But although they may be very selfish, they have not developed any love for absolute evil, because they have only mortal minds, but no spiritual essence to make them immortal. Besides, the astral spirits in man and the elemental spirits of nature, there are many other spirits born within the soul, the will and imagination of nature. And as the mind of man may create monsters, and man may paint their image on canvas or sculpture them in stone or wood, likewise the universal power of will creates monsters in the astral light, and they may throw their shadows forth in the physical world of appearances by becoming objective of corporeal bodies upon the earth. Some of them are short-lived, and others will live until the day of the dissolution of all things. We know that a man may change his character in the course of his life, so that he may ultimately become a very different person from what he was before, and thus every creature having a will can change and become supernatural or unnatural, different from that which normally belongs to its nature. Many of the headlights of the church, who now strut about with jewels and diamonds, will be unhappy evil spirits when the human body in whom they are now masquerading will have disappeared at the time of their death. There are the sirens, but they are merely a kind of monstrous fish. But there are also two more kinds of spirits related to the nymphs and pygmies. Namely the gigantes, giants, and the dwarfs. These may not be believed, but it ought to be remembered that the beginning of divine knowledge is that the light of nature illumines man, and that in this light he knows all things in nature by means of the light of the inner man. The giants and dwarfs are monsters, being related to the sylvestres and gnomes in the same sense as the sirens are related to the undines. Giving it different pronunciations, right? They have no spiritual souls, and may sooner be compared to monkeys than to human beings. Such spirits are often the guardians of hidden treasures. Now, I firmly believe that even the mineral world has, that there's spiritual presence with it, but they don't have souls that are accountable. So the animals aren't morally accountable, is the whole idea. Such spirits are often guardians of hidden treasures. Such things may be denied by the worldly wise, but at their death all things will be revealed. Then will also come forward the so-called doctors and professors who are great in their ignorance. Then it will be seen which ones were those who were learned in the foundation of nature, or merely learned in empty talk. Then will we know those who have written according to truth, and those who taught according to their own fancy, and each one will receive what he deserves. There will then be no doctors and no magistrates, and those who are now making a great deal of noise will then be very silent, but those who have received the true understanding will be happy. Therefore I recommend my writings to be judged at that time, when all things will become manifest, and when each one will see the influence of evil, and they work out their destiny. But the vulgar have a too high estimate of their powers, especially of the power of the devil. The devil has not enough power to mend the old pots, much less to enrich a man. He, or it, is the poorest thing that can be thought of, and poorer than any being that can be found in the four elements. Now, of course, what is the real God and what is the real devil is, of course, a question that should be asked. The devil is an evil spiritual will. The devil has no power over man, but if a man allows a devil within himself to grow, then will the great devil aid the little devil to grow and nourish it with his own substance. There are a great many inventions, sciences, and arts that are ascribed to the agency of the personal devil, but before the world grows much older, it will be found that the devil has nothing to do with such things, and the devil is nothing and knows nothing, and that such things are the result of natural causes. True science can accomplish a great deal. The eternal wisdom of the existence of all things is without a time, and without a beginning, and without an end. Things that are considered now to be impossible will be accomplished, and that which is unexpected will, in the future, prove to be true. And that which is looked upon as superstition in one country will be the basis for the approved science of the next. And I don't know how many programs the 17th chapter will be, but